Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our second episode of The Future of Intermodal. Please join me in welcoming our host, Mr. Frank Sonzala.
Thank you very much, Natalia. Well, I'm excited we have our second podcast coming out, and it's really a good experience for us. As you know, we had one podcast before that. That's why this is the second. I'm really good at numbers. What we're trying to do here is trying to bring out some interesting people that are in our industry and learn a little bit more about them, their products, what they do, how long they've been in the industry. And I think that you're going to like the show. But we also like to talk about some other things. And today, our company soccer team who was named Los Astros. It's hard to say that in knowing that the Houston Astros are in the playoffs now. Basically, they went out today as the first place team and had some tough going. They led 1-0 at the halftime. And in the second half, we ended up losing 3-1. But this is a really good team. There's a really good team and a couple of mistakes in soccer, and you know what happens, you can lose. So now we are 12-3, still in first place. And the second place team is the one that beat us, but they still are behind us in points. So hats off to the guys today that really played hard. And next week, I'm sure we're going to come back on the winning trail. One of the things is that it was a later game, so we're actually getting our podcast started pretty much later than normal. But with that being said, I just wanted to be able to get our first guest on here. And Natalia, who is our first guest?
Thank you, Frank. Our first guest hails from Virginia Beach, Virginia, Mr. Tom McAfee, a global segment manager from PPG. Welcome.
Hey,
Frank, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you for inviting me. Appreciate it.
Thank you for being here. Please, sit down. You know, you and I have known each other for a number of years now, and we travel all over the world.
Yes.
And you're globally, and I'm basically North America now, but I was in Europe there for a while with a former company, and then China a lot of times. Mm-hmm. So our paths had crossed, but then we got to be able to do business because you turned our company on in China to a fantastic process called KTL.
Right. In the U.S., we call it electrode deposition coating. KTL is actually an acronym from Germany, believe it or not, but yes.
Well, the Germans are very smart because I can't pronounce the other one, so it's good that I can say
KTL.
KTL.
Is easy, that's right.
But it works for me.
Right.
So, and I think some people in our audience probably says that's a pretty catchy name, KTL. Tell us about this coating because we're using it on our chassis, and we've been doing that since late 2015. And I'm very happy with it. It looks like an automobile coating, and you can tell us more about it.
We call it the process. So it's not just the paint that makes your equipment perform to your customers' expectations. It's all about the process that you all have installed at Dongguan, right? So it is the surface preparation, the cleaning via blasting. Then we have a series of tanks that goes and cleans, rinses, and conditions the steel before it actually goes into the painting.
How many tanks?
There are 16 in your process total.
16.
Right. It's a huge process, and it's easy to run. Interestingly enough, the whole process is pretty much run from a laptop, if you can believe that.
Yeah, I know. I go into the control room there,
right.
And I expected to see somebody launching a satellite to outer space, but there is a lot of lot of gauges and a lot of technology behind it.
The beauty of process automation, which is once you get your process set up, it runs consistently every single day, which is again then goes back to the quality of your product. So once you all set that up, it works very well day in and day out and gives your customers the same quality.
When you say tanks, a lot of our people out there, their listeners and watching this podcast, probably don't know how big it is, but I know we make 53-foot chassis,
right.
And we make extendable chassis,
right.
And all of them have different parts. How many feet wide and how many feet long and how many feet deep?
So they're pretty darn deep, and I wish I was a better mathematician to understand what the the actual gallons are. I believe it's somewhere in the neighborhood of about 16,000 gallons, but they are approximately 20 feet deep, somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 feet wide, and then, of course, the length of a chassis, which I think your tanks are about 60 feet long, right? So that
I
you
believe they're
have
60, yeah.
Yeah. They hold quite a few gallons in each. Of course, again, you have rinse tanks, you have cleaning tanks, you have the paint tank, then you have the post-rinse tanks. And incidentally, that process, what's really interesting is you operate at about a 96% material efficiency. So
Absolutely.
That means, right? And when you used to spray paint, you'd get about 50% material efficiency.
Exactly. You
Right.
got more on
Right.
your gloves and your outfit that you're protecting yourself with than you do on the
Yep.
actual vehicle.
Exactly.
One thing that I noticed that it does come out and it does go through some heating.
Right. So it is what we call a thermoset product material. So just like a polyurethane, or this is actually an epoxy material. Once it goes through the painting tank and the excess material gets rinsed off, then it goes into an oven. And it's actually a chemical reaction that takes place with that resin, with the pigment that takes place, and you get a thermoset product that is baked on. So it's a baked finish on the chassis as the primer, and then of course we can talk about the top coat as well. But the key to the system really is, and the performance really comes from the KTL system, as you call it.
Yes.
That's really where your customers get their performance, and it rivals many other technologies in the marketplace today in terms of performance. So
I do know that when you're spraying, anything that is not being used to do the coating goes to the floor and is totally recyclable.
right.
And so you have, that's a great part because you lose so much with the other paints
Right.
and everything else. This is really a keynote to the return on investment
Yes.
for putting that kind of money into this kind of a coating system.
Yes.
For example, in Canada and around the Great Lakes and everything, there's a lot of people that have specified in the past galvanizing because they believe that galvanizing is the technology has been around for years, more than 62 years. It's been probably 100 years people have
Right.
been doing galvanizing. However, galvanizing adds weight because you're actually putting a metal on her, right? And so when it adds the weight, I don't know how many, you can tell me roughly how many pounds that is, but how does this process compare in both weight and longevity? I know we're giving a 10-year warranty on our Revere chassis,
Right.
and our Revere chassis are all coming out in this kind of cool maroon color, and I know that it's easy to change colors when you're using this kind of process too. So first question is, how it performs versus the old-fashioned galvanizing, and second question is how do you change out colors? Because we're
Right.
getting into this color age around our studio here. If you get a chance to look around, we've got color everywhere.
PPGs everywhere.
Nice color. There we go. But
Yeah. So as far as the technology is concerned, hot dip galvanizing, there's no doubt it's a great solution. Okay. There's a place for everything though, and in case we like to call hot dip galvanizing a 50-year solution for a 20-year product. Not that your chassis won't last more than 20 years, but that's why utility poles and that type of thing, which are permanent, they're permanently installed, right? Hot dip galvanizing is typically used on that. It is a workhorse product. It adds quite a bit of weight to a chassis and or a container or a trailer, for example. Somewhere in the neighborhood of about 20 pounds of extra weight to a chassis.
Okay.
If you hot dip galvanize or trailer components. Some people, they hot dip galvanizing a dry van, for example. A lot of the trailer components today are hot dip galvanized. So it does add considerable weight. But again, the key really is what does your technology do versus the hot dip galvanizing. Hot dip galvanizing is essentially hot molten zinc. You take your product and you would dip it in that zinc. There's a couple of things that take place when you do that. First of all,
is that environmentally friendly?
It is in the sense that it's not giving off a lot of organic compounds into the air, but then you have the safety hazard with hot molten zinc, and you also have the cleaning process that leads up to that, which takes a lot of acid. That acid has to be disposed of in some places, which is a big hazard. So
and
it can be an
I
issue.
recall hearing that you really can't weld on it because then the acids become very toxic.
Right.
Is that true?
Well, it's the zinc. It's just that if you're a welder and you weld on zinc, then you'll get the fumes from the zinc itself that'll volatilize.
Well, that's not good.
Yeah. So, but again,
What if you weld on the KTL coating?
It's like any other paint. I mean, there's
Just burns it off.
safety issues, right? You would burn it off and do your welding, right?
Okay.
Again, it's about the process. The KTL system has got a pre-treatment, and then it has the paint, and then it has the top coat of the powder. So you're a lot easier to do it that way. So.
How easy is it to change colors?
Well, obviously you're going to end up with zinc if you hot dip galvanize, but for your process, believe it or not, it's about a 20-minute cycle time. If you have one of your customers coming down the line that uses orange, they can actually clean out your booth. And of course you have two separate booths, but you can actually switch, and it's about a 20-minute downtime to convert over from one color to another in the process that you all have put in Dongguan.
And it's very clean too. I mean, the whole area is very clean.
The powder is 0 VOC. Again, the KTL is relatively low. You're right. So,
very, very good. Good.
One other interesting fact is you guys have now installed 3 other locations with this very same technology. So I think it kind of speaks for itself how well it works, number one, and number two, the efficiency of the process. I don't think CIMC would invest in other operations if it's not a proven technology. And again, the performance, we talked about efficiency, we talked about the quality, and then the performance of the technology as well. When you look at your chassis, it's a fairly complex part, right? I mean, you think about all the welding, all the different cross members,
absolutely,
right? It's from a manual spray perspective, it's very difficult. But when you take that whole part and stick it down inside of a tank, it's completely coated. The other thing that we didn't touch on is film thickness. So we also, through the process, control the film of the paint. When you're manually spraying something, you'll get one amount of paint here, and
right.
And so you talked about,
and you'll get drips and runs too.
And that comes down to the efficiency of the material. So you don't get that with E-coat, with electrodeposition coatings. So to your point about controlling cost, when you go into the E-coat tank, it's a plating process, and you actually plate the same amount of material on every square inch of that part. You get the same film thickness.
Well, I think you've given us a really good education in this short period of time on this new coating process. I look at it and I call it the Bentley process, because it looks like you just have a Bentley automobile going down the road. I think it's time for a commercial break, so don't leave. There's a short commercial break.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that you enjoyed that wonderful commercial. Now we're going to continue on to our next segment, Sports in 60 Seconds. Frank?
Yes, what we do here is we ask you a question about sports, whether it's the sports that you've played or sports that you watch or any kind of sports that you like, and just to tell us why you like it, and you got 60 seconds to do that, and the clock is running now.
Okay, sports. Well, I'll say that I'm a huge ACC basketball fan. I've always liked watching both Duke and Carolina. I wish people go, "What are you, crazy?" But
Yeah.
I'm just a big ACC basketball fan. I am a marathoner. Run a couple marathons, half marathons, and so I played some sports growing up. But that's pretty much the extent. I've been a lifelong Cowboys fan. My father was in the military when I was a kid, so we lived in Texas, and unfortunately, thick and thin through the years, it's been good and it's been bad. But I've been a Cowboys fan for a long, long time. So, but I'll tell you what, it's hard to get away from ACC basketball. So
ACC basketball, and you have the Cowboys as your football team, and basically marathoner. And today, here in the Long Beach area of Los Angeles, was their annual marathon. Well, next part of this is my favorite part is music. Okay, what kind of music do you like? Why? And what? And it can be anything that you feel, just right off the top of your head.
you're really making me think tonight, aren't you?
Well, that's what you're supposed to do. I just have to be asking questions.
Well, I'm grew up in the '70s, so I'm an old rock and roller. So I like rock and roll music. Probably one of my favorite bands is the Eagles.
Eagles.
I saw plenty of Eagles concerts, plenty of Rolling Stones concerts through the years, and I like good guitar music. So Eric Clapton's one of my faves.
Oh, wow.
Obviously. And I play around with a bass a little bit, so I've played. I have a son that's an extremely good guitar player, so we play together a little bit and enjoy that. So that's pretty much the extent of my music. Although I will say that Southern rock also is pretty good. So there's a little Leonard Skinner that gets in there every once in a while as well.
Oh yeah, I think. Yeah. Well, thanks for that. That's interesting.
Yep.
Yeah. Give me your thoughts. How did you like the interview and the format? Anything you think we should have changed?
Yeah, I think it's lively, it's entertaining, and we certainly hope our customers, our joint clients that we have together, will take something away from this and hopefully, gain better perspective over what you all do, what you strive to do, which is dramatically improve the quality of the technology in the industry. There's without a doubt, whether you look at light tower concept just by itself and what you all have done, and then obviously we're very honored to be a part of the process, which, again, I don't see anyone else willing to make the investment that you've done. So certainly it's an exciting time to be in this business and be a part of the CIMC process.
Well, definitely. I would.
The future of Intermodal.
Great. Thank you very much. The light tower that you mentioned, that's what we call our factories.
Right.
And it basically is a beacon to everyone else that this is the way you should be doing business, and you have to embrace technology. Don't be afraid of it.
Right.
Go with it. And it comes out every day. I mean, these things change. In 6 months, there's another one. It's either smaller or bigger or thinner or whatever, but it's all new technology. So, with the wrap up, I want to say you did the bottoms up part really great. So we have a little toast to you and to PPG and to being a great vendor for us, a great friend to me, and thank you for coming on our show today.
Cheers. Cheers to CIMC as well.
Well, we're going to bring our next guest up. Who's the next guest, Celia?
Our next guest, Frank, hails from New Orleans, Louisiana. Mr. Dan McAtee, founder and CEO of FSTR Consulting. Welcome, Dan.
Dan.
Happy to be
Welcome.
here. Thank you.
I'm glad you are here.
Thank you.
Have a seat. You two met each other a little earlier
did.
today.
Good to see you, Dan.
Yep.
And
Good last name.
okay,
Yeah.
both of you have the Mac in front of your last
Son
name.
of.
Yeah,
That's what that means.
son of. I won't close that one out. But and one is a T, and the other one is a fee.
Right.
So actually, the one that's a fee probably should have been a lawyer, and a T should have been a golfer, right?
Probably. We missed our call.
It's cool to have the names like that so close together. And I want you to sit with us and
you.
listen to a little bit here
Sure.
with Dan.
Absolutely.
Dan and I go back meeting in New Orleans and having a dinner conversation and talking about the fact that CIMC Intermodal Equipment is looking at a place to put another factory in the United States, and that we wanted to be able to do something where we could utilize the Mississippi River.
Right.
And when Dan and I got to sit down and talk, I found out that you've had a lot of experience in moving industries and working with governments and doing things like that. So could you give us like an overview of your past life and how you got to be this magnificent counselor to us?
Sure. No, I appreciate that. Look, I mean, I had a standard career for most of my early years with GE. Standard in this fact that
I was a GE
you
guy.
do a lot of moving around, and I've lived more places than people can count, I think, with that. And in that process, and I worked through and was one of the early adopters, if you will, of Six Sigma in GE, one of their very first master black belts. And
Whoa.
that got me into a variety of their business operations areas, and looking at how to make business and operation and process more efficient. And that's not just mechanical processes, but it could be the process of just how they hire people, how they grow and develop their organizations, how they do business development, etc. So that sort of planted in my head the opportunity to look at things always from a fresh start.
Sure.
And kind of say how can we make this better, and see, you were talking earlier about the painting process, and it's, it really comes down to consistency and efficiency and quality. If you've got 100 people painting a chassis, you're going to have inefficiencies there. If you've got a process that's consistent and puts the same mill coating everywhere on that chassis, you're going to get a high quality and consistent product out of that. So that brings me forward to, at one point in my career, I ran the largest explosives company in North America, about $1.5 billion in revenue and about several 100 million tons of explosives.
Okay. All right. Now, explosives company.
Yes.
And what kind of explosives were they?
Primarily for construction. So if you think of the most efficient way,
Like
again,
blowing up a mountain?
blowing up a mountain. Yeah, the most efficient way to move earth is with explosives.
And also like blowing up those buildings that you see?
We supplied explosives for that,
For
but
that-
we
we
wouldn't
didn't do it.
that.
Okay.
That's a very dangerous and tricky thing, and very little explosive is used in that. The largest area of explosive consumption is the coal industry, and so if you think up in Wyoming and Peabody and the large coal mines that are up there, you're throwing thousands of acres of land off of the top of coal fields. And you're doing that with explosives. If you're putting in a highway and you need to build a tunnel or you need to clear a side of a mountain, you're using explosives.
Wow.
If you want to create a pipeline and you need to bury it, you run a trench of explosives and you blow that trench with explosives. So
Absolutely.
and so explosives are used more than people realize. We were actually the only company that still to this day makes dynamite, a very interesting process and very dangerous process.
Anybody smoke in there?
No smoking. In fact, no metal.
Nothing to make it spark, I
Nothing
understand.
metal. It's all wood,
I
and it's all
understand.
run with water and with paddle wheels. It's very interesting. But neither here nor there. We needed more ammonia. Ammonia is one of the
Yes.
precursors for explosives, and hence the connection now to Louisiana. I helped
All right.
locate and build one of the largest ammonia plants in the U.S. Down across from the airport in Louisiana. That process introduced me to the state of Louisiana more so than I had ever known. I think we all think of Louisiana as kind of the party place, or at least New Orleans, but
Of course.
and it has some of that, but it is.
And I've been on the streets of New Orleans with you
yeah.
after hours.
Yes.
So we won't go into that.
No. We found a few places to
A few
hang
places,
out.
yeah. And no explosives, though.
No explosives.
No
No,
explosions.
we don't want explosions where we don't plan for them. That's for sure. But what I found was a great state from a standpoint of doing business. A government there that is very business friendly. People that are amazing in terms of willingness and readiness to bring work there. And so when we started talking, obviously, looking at, well, hey, we need to put some more capacity into the U.S.
Right.
Where could we do it? Well, a couple things that came out about why maybe in Louisiana or at least along the Gulf Coast. One is just looking at it from a distribution perspective and a cost perspective and what we may be able to get benefit-wise from the local region. But secondarily, as you mentioned, the Mississippi River it's really currently only used as a bulk cargo
Right.
logistics environment, but we know that we can move other cargo on that river, and it's extremely inexpensive in relation to other methods, whether it be over road or over rail. It's just slower, but you can build that into your supply chain process, and you can come out with a potential to significantly reduce both incoming transport and outgoing transport costs. And when we did further study, as you know, when we look at your customer base, a large portion of them have product needs in central U.S. and along, in essence,
Yes.
the Mississippi. So whether it be Memphis, St. Louis, Chicago, all hubs that we can reach via the Mississippi River, all hubs that we could transport product to in a more efficient and effective way, but we need a factory.
Right. Well, that to your point there, when we talk about putting a factory in, we have to talk about the logistics. And New Orleans is a deep water port,
Yep.
so you can bring things from all over the world globally through the Panama Canal and wherever, and bring it into New Orleans, and then just put it together, weld it, coat it, everything else, and then put it on a barge, and you can move it to
Absolutely.
Chicago. I could move 400 chassis to Chicago for a lot less money than doing them 4 at a time behind a diesel. Plus, environmentally, it is green because you're losing less diesel fuel.
Yep.
You're moving maybe a little bit slower than you have on highway speed, but you are on the Mississippi River. And I'll tell you, going to China for a long time and looking out at the Yangtze River across the Bung in
Yep.
Shanghai, and that is like a super highway of boats.
Yeah,
Up and down, up and down, up and down, all day long, all night long. And when I saw that early on in my career going to China, I thought to myself, we have a Mississippi River and some other big rivers, Ohio and everything else that come in and around that. Why don't we do that? And to your point, once again, bulk only.
Right.
So we're going to revolutionize things once we do something with a factory there. We got a little way late in getting it done because of some things going on in
Sure.
the in the industry, but in the political realm and geopolitical realm. But eventually, that's probably going to be the best place for us to put a really good distribution point and a really good factory.
Absolutely, and not only on just the outgoing, as you mentioned, but think of raw material delivery into that location. New Orleans is one of only, I believe, 2 locations in the U.S. where all 6 Class A railroads come
Yes.
together.
Wow.
Correct.
It is a deep water port. You can run deep water all the way up to Baton Rouge if you so desired. We wouldn't need to go that far inland. But it really offers things that perfectly fit with the needs of what CIMC is needing in its future when it grows and expands and introduces additional capacity. We can bring steel and other componentry down the river to the factory. We can bring other parts in via rail or via ship, and then we can distribute, as mentioned, product to our customers at a much more efficient cost and process than is currently in the system.
All right. I think we're going to go into a commercial break for now. Natalia?
Yes, we're going to take a short commercial break and we'll be back. Thank you.
We know what chassis go through every single day. The abuse they take, the roads they endure, the containers they carry. That's why we built the longest lasting, lowest cost of ownership chassis in the market. At CIMC Intermodal Equipment, we build equipment you can depend on. Carry more loads, have less downtime, and grow your business. CIMC Intermodal Equipment, leading the intermodal evolution.
First, after that commercial, during the commercial, we were served some wonderful snacks here to go along with our libations.
Thank you,
and
Marcos.
thank you very much to the producer for thinking of us like that, because it works up an appetite when you're trying to talk about things on a podcast.
Yeah.
I'll do my best.
Sports in 60 seconds. Tell us in the 60 seconds your favorite team, sports, whatever.
Well, I mean, everybody that knows me knows it's the Colorado Buffaloes. There is no other sports team on the planet other than the Colorado Buffaloes. Now, they may not do much, and they did win a national championship on a fifth down mistake against Missouri, and that led them to the national championship. And they were, at that time, co-national champions because we didn't really have a process back then.
Right, yeah.
But they've got one. And so, the CU Buffaloes, Colorado Buffs, SCO Buffs, I mean, there is nothing like a Buff fan. My girlfriend, Kristen, she's ever amazed that no matter where we are in the world, we were just in Europe a few weeks back in August, I guess, and I had a CU shirt on, and we're walking down the streets of Munich, and somebody comes up and says, "Go Buffs!" And it's like, she goes, "Really? Even over here, everywhere we go, there are Buff fans."
Of course.
And, yeah.
All right. Now, always my favorite part of any program is the music.
right.
The music. And being a Colorado person, Rocky Mountain High, Colorado, the biggest karaoke song in all of the world.
Yeah.
All of the world. No matter you go in, I don't care what dialect it is, you're going to hear Rocky Mountain High.
Yes, you will.
And basically, what is your favorite music?
Sure.
And let us know.
Yeah, I'm at my soul a Pink Floyd fan.
Absolutely.
I
High five on
love
that.
Pink Floyd just forever. It's just there's just something about the music and the lyrics and how it's all put together. You don't get music like that anymore that just tells a story in your mind throughout an entire album. Most people don't even know what an album is either. So Pink Floyd for sure, but I'll transpose that Colorado-wise. I'm also, best concerts I've seen recently was the Lumineers. Lumineers are absolutely stunning. You mentioned Stevie Ray Vaughan. Was a huge Stevie Ray Vaughan fan. A group of my friends, they're a band called Big Head Todd. I think Todd Park Moore plays the guitar as close to anybody in the world as Stevie Ray Vaughan could, and they're just phenomenal.
Big Head Todd. Oh,
Yeah,
that's
Big
a
Head
that's
Todd,
a blast from the past.
Yeah, no, they're good guys. Rob
Yeah.
Squires plays bass, and we hang out quite a bit. But it's I cover almost anything. Kristen's actually even got me to break into the country realm a little bit. I was never sort of the twangy country. It just didn't quite sit right with me. But I'll do anything from techno to rap to, singer-songwriter probably is where I'm most comfortable these days. If I just have it on, in the background, it's singer-songwriter type stuff that I enjoy.
Very good, very good. Well, New Orleans is a great music capital in the United States, as is Austin, Texas, and a few other places throughout the country. New York and Los Angeles, of course. For me, Pink Floyd, I remember seeing my first Pink Floyd concert in Old Forbes Field in Pittsburgh,
nice.
Pennsylvania. Dark Side of the Moon, where they crashed a plane coming off the roof of the stadium and coming right down into the stage where they're playing, and boom, it hits this round target screen that was just illuminated up there, and it took everybody by surprise. Yeah. And back in that day, I mean, that was really a psychedelic, and it exploded too. So it had all the elements of the things that I like. But some of the times when you hear Pink Floyd stuff and Comfortably Numb or any of these things, you just wonder how they put it all together and how they got people to be able to play that music so tight and so good. And it's one of the few bands that when you hear them live and in concert outdoors, it sounds like the CD-ROM in your car.
Yeah.
It actually does. And I don't know how they do it, but they do it. I did see them in Houston, Texas, and a storm was coming out of the west. And as they were playing, and the storm came rolling in, and it was dark, but it was lightning, and it finally started to rain where the rain was going horizontal, and the wind, and they shut it down. And we all walked out of Rice Stadium, 100,000-seat stadium, plus whatever they put on the floor, packed. And we all walked out in knee-deep water, like 21 inches of rain in that period of time to exit the stadium. Good thing is the lights and electricity didn't go out, or that could have been a very dangerous time. So thank you very much for that. And I really, man, I'm going to start humming stuff from Pink Floyd for the rest of the show.
So thanks for doing a podcast like this, because this allows us to have genuine communication.
Conversation.
Well, I hope it does bring communication out a little bit, or a lot. But the thing is, we sit around and we have these kind of discussions in other places, and why not have it and put it out there? Maybe somebody's going to learn something from this show. Yeah. Maybe some will take that to their children and say, hey, maybe you should watch this show. Look at what they're talking about. Yeah. They're talking about your generation. Of course, my generation and your generation, and I call you a kid. But, our generation had its quirks, too.
Yes.
But we did communicate a lot. A lot of it was with our parole officers, but but the whole idea is we did communicate, and I think we're communicating here, but it's electronically and it's digital. Yeah. I mean, but so much easier to send a text than to get somebody to answer the phone.
It is.
And I guess maybe that's the age we live in, but hopefully this podcast reaches out and people talk about it, and we get some more listeners. We had a really good reaction to our first one, hopefully the second one. So we have, that was your final antidote, yep. And we're going to get into the wrap-up, okay?
May I ask Dan a question?
Yes.
Please. Dan, I just want
Can
to
you
know,
text it to me?
You know what, I'll text it. No. Just text me later. I just want to know for you, what has been the most rewarding part of consulting?
That's also a good question, and I'll tell you sort of the initial hard part of consulting, and then the rewarding part of consulting. Okay. The hard part is, and I think most of us in this room and in general, we like to see things from start to finish. And consulting, sometimes you get to start things and not always finish things. And that's kind of a frustrating element, because you get yourself mentally and committed to whatever that particular product or process is, or whatever you're working on. And then once your time's up, or the contract's done, or you've met certain, then you move on to something else, and you're like, yeah, but I want to know what happened next. And so that's a hard part for me.
Never getting that closure.
Right. But the positive, which is the exact antithesis of that, is you get to touch so many different things. And so you see a lot of very random and different things. And what you start to realize over time is business is business, and it doesn't matter if you're making explosives or trailers or widgets or gidgets or whatever that may be. Business is business, and process is process, and so you can start to apply things in a very consistent way and a methodical way that can improve just about anything. And that's fun for me. That's what I enjoy most, is you can go into things that people think, you talk longevity of the trucking industry or the painting industry. I was in the steel industry. That's the same sort of industry, long in the tooth. You can still go in and make improvements in the steel industry, even though you're not fourth generation steel person. Yeah. And that's the rewarding part of consulting, is you get to touch and do things in different areas. You just don't always get to see them all the way through.
Thank you.
I actually, very good question too, Natalia. I actually have some pictures of us doing some work, and Dan is the king of the whiteboard. We had to move the whiteboard out of our studio here, because he would have been up and over there, and it would not be a whiteboard anymore. It would have every color used and everything else. Or he's also, if you have a plain wall, the big Post-it notes that are like 8.5 by 11 is on that wall over and over and over again. And I have a picture from one of the things in New Orleans. Yep. That you had actually wallpapered that entire huge conference room. Wallpapered. Yeah. And all of that stuff is very good information, but we had to do it. And because he's a consultant, and he made us all think, and he made us all look at things 2 or 3 different ways, that helped us understand the bigger part of the complexity of putting a factory somewhere. And also the environmental and everything else that you have to go through with the government. So that was very, very good.
Approach. How is it going to affect everyone?
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that. No.
So, Marcos, do you have anything you'd like to add before we do the wrap-up?
Well, not too much today. I mean, I really appreciate you guys coming by. I did have some questions about how it was working with Tesla, Tom. I know that you did their right.
Yeah, so PPG, interesting part of our business is also not only to sell paint, but we also manage paint lines. And so we do that for a lot of companies, and Tesla happens to be one
Yes.
company that we manage their, part of our services that we supply to industry is to actually design, build, and install, kind of like what we were talking about at your location, where we design, build, and actually operate a line. So in some cases, we literally would go and completely code a part, whether it's a car or a car frame or whatever, or it could be a widget or whatever, and we charge by the part. So I don't have direct involvement with the folks that run and own Tesla, but I hear that there's a lot of fun times there, and it's been a challenge just because of the growth of the company, and it's been interesting, and it's been good for our company. It's been very good exposure as well, just to get that particular part of our service business out there also.
Very, very good.
Yeah. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I really enjoyed this video chat with you both. I want my hats off to the two Macs that came in, you know.
Thanks for inviting us.
The Macs, the T and the Fee. And basically, thank you for all of your insight, input, and sharing a little bit of your background and your thoughts with us. Your product, wonderful PPG. We're big proponents of it, and it's one of our big marketing and selling items to our customers. And I think it has revolutionized the chassis industry because we have 45,441 chassis last year, 2018, that went out of our two plants here in the United States. And basically, those are going to be all around for a long time. And they're going to look like a nice Ferrari finish to them or something, or a Bentley finish. It's going to be beautiful.
Yep.
And Dan, for you to come on out of your busy schedule of watching Colorado football.
Yeah, we didn't do so well against Oregon this week.
But hey, you beat Nebraska.
Yeah, we did beat
Yeah,
Nebraska,
I mean-
and that's all that matters.
I know.
For a Colorado buff to beat Nebraska, you don't need anything else
I
for
know
the
it's a
season.
big rivalry,
That's all
big
it is.
rivalry. But the thing is, really, I like that both of you have been here. I enjoyed it very much. This will bring us to the end of our podcast, and I got my little microphone here. Maybe I can stick it over here, because as you know, if anybody saw the first podcast, at the end of every podcast, because everybody says, Frank, you live in California, why do you wear a tie? It's always casual Friday there, and so on and so forth. But I grew up being the tie and the everything like that was your uniform. So when I take my uniform off, then I can actually get into the party mode and put that business mode behind me. Possibly not that far behind me, but right here we have the tie shade. So number 2, this is how we keep track of how many podcasts we have. Number 2 is right here, and it'll be here for the next 12 months because we're going to do one a month. And basically, the podcast is over. Like us, and if you don't like us, keep it to yourself. But no, like us if you can. Send us any kind of questions and maybe some kind of guest that you would want to be on. If you're out there and you're somebody that is as interesting as these two people, let us know. We'll bring you on this podcast right here. It's always sunny in California. Beautiful weather outside today, and with this great food and some libations. Everybody, let's have a little toast to podcasts,
Cheers.
to the internet, to life as we know it, and to getting up every day and going to your hobby, which other people call work.
That's
We
right.
call it our hobby.
Absolutely. Here.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers, cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers, cheers. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.